probably happens to all of us. You're telling a story to somebody, and you're excited about that story, and there's all these details, and if you're like me, you want to get every one of those details into that story, and then somewhere along the way, the story goes off track, right? It derails. Maybe another thought comes in, and you stop that thought, and you stop that part of the story, and you get in, something else gets in there. And this happens to me a lot. You're probably going, yeah, Pastor, tell us about it. And like sometimes I'll be like, did I stop mid-thought and then interject something else? And did I ever get back to that original thought? So I'll have to go back and watch the tape and see if I actually did that. And most of the time, and that's by the power of God, that I get somehow mosey back to where I was. But that's one thing when you're telling a story. But what about when you're living your story? And things that are much more serious come in and get our story off track. Because I think most of you, as you were growing up, or even as you're growing up now, if you're for the younger folks around with us, you're kind of looking at your story and you have it set up the way you want it to go. You have some idea of where it's supposed to be. Right? Maybe you're going to be a doctor, a lawyer, maybe you're going to be a scientist, or maybe you're going to be a veterinarian, maybe you want to be a rock star, maybe you want to be a teacher, maybe you want to be a mom or a dad, and you want to have the white picket fence, and you have that all dialed in, and then something happens, a disappointment happens, someone passes away, you have someone that gets sick, or maybe you get sick, or maybe you're going to be the football star and you're going to play for the Bears, and then your shoulder gets all messed up and you can't play, and all of that just got rewritten. It feels like the lightning bolt has hit the computer that your story was being written on, and it's erased. And maybe you're there kind of feeling like Ruth in our story today. Now we're going to be finishing up kind of the first act of the story this week, and next week we'll be kind of just finishing out chapter 9 and 10. Today we'll be looking at 9, and during the week I'll try to get a sermon up online for 10, so you can check that out. I think it's very, very important stuff that we want to look at, and because it's this story, and it seems like it has gotten kind of derailed, and it seems like they've gotten off track as God is telling the story. And we had the judges last week, and you're just going, wow, wait a second, that really got off track. But those people were just, you kept hearing this refrain, Israel did evil in the eyes of the Lord, they did evil in the eyes of the Lord, and you're going, wait, but these are the people that are supposed to carry the promise, right? It's through these people this is supposed to happen. And then you have Ruth, and let's turn to Ruth 1, chapter 1 there. And it was in those days of the judges, in a kind of a dark time for God's people. There's a famine there, and there's a man from Bethlehem, Bethlehem. So it begins going, all right, we're in Bethlehem. Oh, little town of Bethlehem. The Christmas Bethlehem, the one that we're going to be talking about really soon. And we're like, all right, we're back on track. Right? The story is rolling. We're in Bethlehem, but there's a famine, and they actually leave. There's a guy named Elimelech. He has a wife by the name of Naomi, and they have these two boys, Mahlon and Chilion, and they're going to go to Moab. Now, Bethlehem is kind of where the story is going to be centered. The story, God's story, how He saves us. But they're going to move kind of south, and I guess on the map it would be east, and it's away from Jerusalem, it's away from Bethlehem, it's away from where all the action is going to happen. And you're going, wait a second. Oh boy, where has this happened before? Back in Genesis with Joseph. And there's a famine. And the people go from their land where they're supposed to be. And again, they've gotten back there. Where are they going? Why are they going to Moab? Why is this story going to take us down there? Those people don't worship God. They have other gods. They're foreigners, and God's people are going to go there. And we know what happens when God's people start going to places like Egypt. The story gets off track. They wind up being enslaved. God winds up having to save them. Something similar happens. It's not exactly that way, but as you look at chapter 3, right away, we're 3 verses in, and the husband has died. Elimelech is dead. Now, in those days, for a woman, she didn't have her husband's pension, his Social Security. She didn't have his life insurance policy. She didn't have the house that they lived in that's paid for or that's close to being paid for. There was no security. There was no kind of welfare. There was her husband, and he's gone. So her only hope is to go home, to go back to Bethlehem. Now, but she's got these two sons, and they have married Moabite women. And they have died as well. And so Naomi's there, her only support is gone, and these two gals in a foreign land, have lost everything as well. So what are they going to do? So Naomi says, all right, here's what we're going to do. You guys are Moabites. You're foreign women. You and your family have no real, you don't really have to take care of me. In fact, you probably won't. Your family probably won't. These people probably won't. I'm not part of them. So I'm going to go where I belong. I'm going to go back to Bethlehem. I'll have a hope there. And you guys stay here. You find your crew. You find your family, and they will take care of you. That's your best shot. This is my best shot. So I'm going to go, and you guys hang here and stay. And the girls they love this lady, right? This is mom. This isn't just their mother-in-law. This is mom. And they're like, no, we're going to stay. And she's like, no. Go back to your gods. Go back to your people. I'll go to mine. And everything will be, we'll see what happens. And she convinces Orpah, the one daughter, to stay or to go. And she leaves and she goes. And there's tears. And it's not a good thing. It's not an easy decision. But she goes. And then she goes to Ruth. And Ruth is like, no, I'm not going anywhere. And look at what she says. Naomi can't urge her. Naomi can't convince her at all. And so if you look at chapter 2. No, it's in chapter 1. In verse 16. Ruth says, look, don't urge me to leave you or to turn back from you. Where you go, I will go. And where you stay, I will stay. Your people, they're going to be my people. Your God, my God. Where you die, I will die. And there I will be buried. I mean, you're talking about faithfulness. You're talking about somebody who embodies what that means. She is the real deal. Ruth's like, no way. In fact, may the Lord deal with me, be it ever so severely, if anything but death separates you and me. She's like, only death is going to make me stop. This is her non-negotiable, folks. She's like, this is what I am going to do. Leave? No way. And I mean, think about that situation. This isn't Thelma and Louise, driving in a cool car and they're going to take on the world. Okay, this is not that story at all. This is a story of like, okay, we don't know what's going to happen. Because now Naomi's going with a foreign woman into Bethlehem, and what's going to happen? Who's going to take care of them? They may take care of Naomi, but who knows what's going to happen with Ruth? And they may not even take care of Naomi. We don't know. I mean, they have obligations, and there's family obligations. And as we're going to see, those get honored. And what's amazing is God takes Ruth, who is this foreign woman, whose family worship foreign gods, who God uses to save us. It's an amazing, this is more than just some Hallmark story. This is more than just tugs at your heartstrings and, oh wow, what a nice thing, she stays. I mean, that's only part of the picture, part of the story, because the big picture is God coming and saving us. Because what happens is, it's not by accident that she winds up where family is, and there's a guy who is from Elimelech's clan, and his name is, he's a man of standing, his name is Boaz. We learn that in the beginning of chapter 2. And Ruth winds up gleaning in his field. And basically what that meant was you were picking up the stuff that the people who were harvesting left behind. So you're living on scraps, okay? This is not the success story yet. This is not the, wow, they're saved. This is, maybe they won't harm you. You'll be safe there. Just pick up some scraps. We'll have enough to get by. But then this relationship develops between Boaz and Naomi kind of nudges her, towards, kind of connecting, and he winds up taking care of them. She winds up going from picking scraps to being at his table. And then finally wind up becoming his wife. Because what he does is he redeems her. There was a concept back then called a kinsman redeemer, and it was a relative. And in order to keep inheritance and in order to keep things in the family, when a husband died, his family was obligated. There was a guy, kind of the next closest relative, was obligated to do something about that and buy property that was there and to take care of any people that were part of that. Now, the guy who was first in line bows out because he wants to protect his assets, and he wants to make sure that he doesn't, that Ruth doesn't have some kid that's going to take all his stuff, I guess. I don't know, that's kind of how I read it. Maybe I'm being a little hard on the guy, but once he hears that he's got some human beings involved, he doesn't mind the land transaction. Remember in the story, Boaz says, all right, hey, you can do this, buy the land. It was Elimelech's land. And he's like, all right, cool. He's like, but remember, when you buy that, you got Naomi and Ruth that come along. And he's like, oh boy, all bets off. No, you do it, dude. And he kind of passes it back to him. Boaz wanted that to happen. He's like, he's got his fingers crossed. I kind of see him going, please let him say no, let him say no. And he highlights the fact that because property's property, man. You just let it sit, and but people, it's a much bigger thing. There's a whole lot of stuff that comes with that, and Boaz, he wants to help. He wants to redeem them in the biggest way. He wants to buy them back, not as property, but as family, as people that he loves, as people that he's going to take care of. And as God is working, he is making all that happen so that Ruth marries Boaz, and they have a little guy named Obed. And at the end of Ruth, you have this awesome it's very short, little genealogy. Because Obed has what? If you look at verse 17, it says, the woman saw and said, Naomi has a son, and they named him Obed. And he was the father of Jesse, who was the father of David. It's kind of a perfect place for us to break this week, isn't it? As we look at the prophet Isaiah makes much of this root of Jesse, right? The root of the stump of Jesse. That's David, and coming from David it's all these other his son and his son and his son, and track it all the way to Jesus. See, we thought the story had derailed. We thought it had gotten off track. They're in Moab. The people that are going to take care of them die. And you see, and God is going, all right, now I can do some stuff. Because if they're sitting pretty in Bethlehem and everything just humming along, that God could easily work through that. But then what happens is, right, human beings would be like, wow, look what we did. We'd be patting ourselves on the back all day long, and God would just fade from the picture in our minds. But he's going, no, with me, you've got what you need. And in this story, as we bring it into our story, sometimes we feel just like Ruth, like God has just kind of like dropped us in the middle of nowhere and says, all right, you fend for yourself. And we're like, where did my story go? I was supposed to be on chapter 5, and I'm not even getting out of chapter 1 when it comes to what I'm going to do in my life. How did I get here? How did this happen? I had dreams, I had goals, I had things that I wanted to do. And if it's one thing that doing this story series has done for me, and I hope it's done it for you, and is to see that this is not so much me inviting God into my story. We like to think that, isn't it? God, I have my life, I've got my kids, I got my house, I got my car, I got my job, I got all this and I got all that, and God, I'll give you some time. As if God should go, thank you, dude, for 15 minutes. Awesome. Yeah. On Tuesday, you're going to give me 15. That is stellar. Awesome. Thank you. Thanks for letting me in to be a part of your life. Is that how it works? Is that the story with Ruth? Is that the story with any of the guys that we have tracked with so far? Not at all. See, when we do that, that's when we get into trouble. Because now I'm focused on me. And when I'm focused on me, that is one gigantic snuggie, right? That I'm just building. It's a big, massive snuggie that's just going to take care of me and comfort me and keep all kinds of problems, right? Because if I've got the pen or if I'm on command of the computer, I'm making sure my story is written the way I want it to be. So it's all about me. It's the story of me, right? I'm on the cover, with a cheesy face or something. Come on, we know this is what we do. Because I do it. But stuff happens. horrible things happen, like happened to Ruth. People are taken from us, things are taken from us, powers that we have, abilities that we have get changed, and they slow down, and we age, and people come at us, and things happen, and it's not the way we wanted it to be. Again, it's like lightning hit the computer, and it zapped it, and it's off, and the story's gone, and what am I going to do? But, and if it was just my story, that would be tragic, wouldn't it? And we should all just head home and just hide in our rooms. But what if, and I think this is the deal, Ruth's story reminds me that this is actually God bringing me into his story. Even if I run, even if I do what Naomi and her family did. Well, okay, God can't take care of me in Bethlehem, so I better go and find where there's food somewhere else. And maybe God's going, wait, dude, that's not where you're supposed to go. He'll even use that. Even when I wander, even when I get lost, even when I try to, erase what he's written and put my own thing in there, he's like, all right, we're just going to have to work with that. And he'll do it. And he works all things for the good of those whom he loves and who love him. And we have this relationship, and he loves us, and he died for us, and he cares about us. And he's saying, you know what, guys, it's not about you becoming part of inviting me into your story. It's about me bringing you into my massive story that has one thing on my story. God has one thing on all of our stories. You know what that is? His doesn't end. Okay? Think about this. If it's just my story and what I'm going to write, that story has an ending, doesn't it? But when God invites me into his story doesn't have an end. It's eternal. It's eternal. It doesn't end. It's everlasting. He's saying, why don't you come into my story? Why don't you come into the thing that I am doing here? Isn't it awesome in Ruth to see that as he just kind of like, they're not even aware of it, I don't think. She's just in a field and she's meeting a guy and it's this love story. And the next thing you know, we're back on track to saving the world. And Ruth, who was a foreigner, becomes part of the family line of Jesus. And so we learn one thing, and it's something that brings hope to me and to all of us, that God can use anyone. And also that God wants to save everyone. He can use anyone because he wants to save everyone. Galatians 3, Paul says it this way. He says, Christ redeemed us. Just like Boaz redeemed Ruth and Naomi and saved them. But there was more to that. Again, he was preparing this way. He was saying, all right, it looks like the story's gotten off track, but we're back here. We're back, okay? Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, right? And we're going all through that. And it looks like it kind of derailed a little bit, and there was a little break in the line, but here we're back. But he uses a foreign lady, puts her in there, and now we got Obed, and then we're going to have Jesse, and then we're going to have David, and that line is going to continue. So he redeemed us, Jesus did, the Christ redeemed us from the curse of the law by doing what? By becoming a curse for us. For it is written that it is cursed for anyone who is hung on a tree. Jesus redeemed us, Paul says, in order that the blessing given to Abraham, way back, might come to the Gentiles, to people like Ruth, to people like you, people like me, that it might come to us through Christ Jesus. So that by faith, by simply trusting in him, by simply believing and knowing what he's done for us, that we might receive the promise of the Spirit. We have been redeemed, we have been bought back, we have been saved, we have been delivered by what Jesus did for all of us. See, that's the point of this whole story. Is how much God loves us and how he saves us. And we're going to take a little break from this story in a couple weeks, and we're going to I think kind of get deeper into where this story is heading. We're going to kind of jump forward to Christ and to the cross and to all that he did as he came there on that Bethlehem in that manger. But as you experience Christmas this year, as we go through, as we prepare for that, I pray that all that we've looked at over the last, this is like 10 weeks that we've gone through this, that we would link that God who did all those things in Genesis and Exodus and Leviticus and in Joshua and in Judges and here in Ruth, He's the same one that sent his son to die on that cross and to come on that Bethlehem morning to be one of us and to be with us and to save us. In his name, amen.